As of the time of recording this, the recent season of Kamen Rider is Kamen Rider Revice, with a total of 18 episodes. So, spoilers for Revice up to episode 18, obviously. The recent episode aired and was subbed not that long ago. And of course, people went to social media platforms taking all these amazing scenes, all these cool fights, and all these cool special effects and called it whatever new slang we use to call fiction grade as of recent. Though one scene in particular, a short yet heavily impactful and well-earned scene, spoke out to me. When I watched the episode, I genuinely had to pause after this scene to register how amazing it was. Out of an episode that can easily be considered the most violent one so far, it was a scene where not a single fist was raised. Yeah, this scene. This quiet, almost somber scene of Icky and Vice talking out their inner turmoils before they eventually head off to fight Julio. When I saw this scene, it spoke to me. It touched my heart. It told this amazing and powerful message to the audience with some of the best subtlety through symbolism I've ever seen in a Rider show. I've even went as far to say on Twitter that this was not only the best scene in Revice so far, but in the Reiwa era as a whole. And I am more than willing to back up that claim. So, the basis of this conversation between Icky and Vice is a recurring issue with Icky that we've seen throughout the show. Most notably in scenes like his night talk with Mom in the Vacation episode, and Vice's little pep talk with him in the episode following the Body Direct's debut. For once in the show, Icky is actually talking about this issue and admitting to it himself, that he ultimately doesn't truly care for himself, and more so believes that by helping and saving others, that he himself will ultimately be happy. Icky is plagued with a massive amount of selflessness, a trait that is usually associated with these heroic main characters in tokusatsu/superhero media as a whole. Yet for once, in a show like this, a Kamen Rider show, we see that concept cracked into with a bit more complexity. Yes, Icky's selflessness is what helps him continue fighting the dead mans, saving people's lives, what keeps him an upstanding member of his family, and overall what keeps him a hero. But yet, in there directly lies Icky's issue. He's too selfless. All of his actions and his reason to fight was never for himself. It was partly because, yeah, it's the right thing to do and all, but it's mostly because that's the only thing he can do to find his own sense of purpose and worth. His self-sacrificing nature acts like a raging fire that literally burns away at him, both physically and mentally. It takes a toll on him as a heavy burden to save everyone. We see that when Oteka taunts him at the end of 17, teasing that his new power wasn't enough to save that poor woman who became a monster. When that burden and pain starts to swallow Icky whole, he ran in alone without Vice, leading to what we currently see now. This raging fire of his is something that he believes is not only swallowing him whole, but Vice as well. As established since episode 1, Vice and Icky are linked. If Icky dies, Vice would too, and in the show's run, Icky hasn't hesitated to fight against enemies who seem infinitely stronger than he was, with no guarantee that he would survive. So to believe Vice to be mad is kind of beyond justified. Yet, as the demon responds, it isn't with a hint of anger. It's actually one of the only moments in the show where Vice doesn't speak with his usual loud, booming voice, and talks calmly to Icky. It really helps set the tone of the scene. He denies Icky's claim that he doesn't care about himself and makes Icky realize something so obvious to not only himself, but the audience as well, that he let himself forget. Vice isn't just some being possessing him or tagging along. Vice is someone who's been with Icky from the beginning, because he is Icky's inner demon, a part of Icky that I believe everyone realistically has. It's a side of Icky that wants to be selfish, that wants to follow his own dreams and live his own life, only materialized into an exaggerated version of those feelings, culminating into what we see now. The inner demons in Revice help not only to add more items into a toy catalog, but to give another side and another view to a character that gives them a much needed depth. Let's take Kagero and Lovekov, the demons of the two little Igarashi siblings, and I'll make it quick. So Kagero is the manifestation of Daiji's hatred and jealousy of Icky, resulting in this kind of unhinged guy that is focused on killing Icky. This jealousy he's born from was drawn out into this vengeful demon, so we can assume that this hate for Icky was something Daiji saw as vile and awful. something, evil. Or at least we could if Daiji got more screen time. The same goes for Lovekov. Sakura grows from her younger, more naive self that she viewed as pathetic. That view was stretched and materialized into a small, young-sounding little creature that can't even fend for itself. It usually has to have others protecting it, representing perfectly how Sakura saw herself. So, what does this mean for Vice? Well, let's just review over everything we know. For one, Vice is always loud, attempting to be in both Ikki's and the audience's face. If we keep running with this Vice is self-care idea, we can assume that Ikki finds the idea annoying or overwhelming with its presence, or even thinks that letting that side be present would make him obnoxiously egotistical. Vice in earlier episodes always attempted to eat humans, more specifically, a lot of members of Ikki's family. We could gather that Ikki fears that his desires and wants might eat away at everything he holds dear if he lets them take control. For a while in the show, Ikki didn't hesitate in the slightest to be mad at Vice, constantly berating him and sometimes trying to beat him when it got to its worst. We can assume from this that his own desires and the urge to take care of himself is something Ikki physically beats down and restrains within himself. We can even go as far as to look at the way Vice is included in the show cinematography-wise. When it comes to the non-action scenes, Vice is often put in the scene in post because, well, 1, he's a ghost, but 2, he's always put in awkward spots on the screen, a place that isn't given much thought or isn't really meant to be focused on. Often he speaks aloud to the audience, yet barely is responded to by anyone, even by Ikki. From the directing alone, we can get this idea that the side of Ikki is one that holds little importance as an inner struggle to him, especially when compared to every external struggle the show throws at him. Without any flashbacks or hints to his backstory, and just by how Vice is incorporated into the show, we know that Ikki not only dislikes taking care of himself, but despises it. I'd even go as far as to say he fears it. He does his best to keep it down and under his control, even if it means sometimes he has to physically hurt himself and insult himself and pay no mind to what he feels and wants. He acts this way out of fear that his own desires will eat away and block out and make him lose one of the things he values the most, his family. This fear causes him to act solely by a want to be selfless, a want to find another way to have happiness and worth without indulging in himself. But now he's finally realizing that he can't. If he lets all of his desires be consumed by an unhealthy, burning obligation to help, he'll be consumed by that fire. Also, side note, in this talk, Vice claims him and Ikki used to be one, and this intrigued me, because Kagero claimed in his arc that he was born very early in Daiji's life. So when was Vice born?
Yo, Future Gear here. I just wanted to say that this question has already been answered with the introduction of Veil and stuff like that. But what I still talk about here is really cool because the cinematography helps further prove the whole Ikki and Vice stuff. But still, it's an answer to a question that's already been solved, so here's a timestamp if you want to skip it, blah blah blah, whatever, thank you, see ya.
When we first see Ikki, he prays for a good day to presumably his favorite soccer player, and we proceed to see his skills right after. Immediately after that moment, we then see that Ikki helps at the bathhouse for his family. That's the first time we ever hear Vice. When Ikki catches a glimpse of Dead Man's activity for the first time, a plot he'll become entangled with later on. That's when we see Vice physically for the first time. The first bit we see of Ikki's self-sacrificing being foreshadowed for the hero he'll become is when that separation of his selflessness and selfishness completes in the Vice. I genuinely really love all these little details. I really just didn't know where to fit this in. Anyways, back to this amazing exchange. Ikki, still seemingly hesitant, is given one more push by his other half, as Vice tells him that he wanted to deny George's taunt to disregard lives. It says a lot to me that even if Vice is meant to be this negative version of what Ikki fears his desires to be, he still sees that Vice echoes him because, once again, he's a part of Ikki. So when Ikki finally meets Vice eye to eye and apologizes, it feels like it isn't just one character saying sorry to another, but like someone apologizing to themselves, apologizing for causing harm for so long. Which of course is met with a calm yet still playful response from Vice, as for the first time the two share a nice, uninterrupted laugh. As the two see the current plot literally erupting from a window, Ikki immediately attempts to go, falling in the process. Vice questions if he's still going to go, in which Ikki responds as expected. Yet this time, it seems like he's doing it because he desires to do so, rather than letting a need for worth drive him. Ikki has learned that if he wants to continue fighting for his family, for his community, for the world, or even just for making Volcano work properly, he needs to make sure he keeps himself stable as a priority. A bruised and burned Ikki that was hurt from an unhealthy lack of self-care, being carried and supported by a concept he used to fear, now accepting it and fighting alongside it. The next time he uses Volcano, the flames of his justice are balanced by the cooling ice of self-love. Two elements, two parts of Ikki's life balancing one another to make a duo act as one. One Kamen Rider, one Revice. This scene gives me a weird yet enjoyable feeling. I feel like I've genuinely never seen a theme or lesson like this from a piece of superhero media before. You have stories where the plot involves a character saving the day through selfless actions, or learning to become more selfless as their story goes on. Hell, some even have the concept of self-sacrifice built so heavily into their character that it feels wrong to have them without it. So to have Revice finally give this lesson, a modern lesson, a lesson that I believe so many need to hear, myself included at times, is honestly nothing short of legendary to me. Being selfless will never not be a heroic act, yet doing nothing but deeds for others and actively ignoring yourself is harmful. Self-care and knowing when and how to take time for yourself is necessary. So eventually, whether you like it or not, you have to accept it. You have to accept yourself. Revice chose to show this by having Ikki being literally hurt from neglecting himself, and his fear of self-indulgence come in the form of a literal demon. That being mixed with some of the most creative writing and directing I've ever seen makes this beautiful arc with a satisfying checkpoint. Revice tells us that being selfish isn't bad, that taking care of yourself isn't bad. So if you pick up anything from this essay, let it be these two things. Go treat yourself and watch Revice. Thank you.
Wait, Future Gia here again, and I just wanted to say thank you. If you were like one of the 5 people waiting for this essay, thank you for waiting so long. I know this is like 30 episodes late in the show, but trust me, episode 18 still holds as my favorite episode of Revice and my favorite episode in Reiwa as a whole. Making this was definitely harder on me than I thought. The delays this project had were so much. First, high school came in and then graduation came, and it was simply just a matter of motivation. I did it. I got around to it and I did it. As of the time of recording this, it's Tuesday, July the 19th. I assume this will go up on Wednesday the 20th, and I'm happy that I have done this. I hope this can lead to me making more video essays. Sure, this may have taken some time, but I do definitely have a list of ideas and such that I want to do, toku or not. I'm kind of glad the script aged well after so long. Sure, the line about Daiji and the whole little theory I had were, you know, here and there, but overall, I think it came out good. Well, this has been Gia, also known as Ghially, or whatever. Follow me on Twitter if you want. Thank you.